The email that ended his job arrived at noon, right when the sunlight finally felt warm enough to forgive 9 stolen years. It arrived while he was holding a paper cup of lemonade with his son's sticky fingerprints on it, while laughter drifted through the air like something fragile and rare, and while, for the first time in nearly a decade, he allowed himself to believe that life might be more than survival. In that single moment, everything he had built through exhaustion, sacrifice, and quiet resilience collapsed with one sentence written by someone who had never once asked why he worked so hard or what it cost him to smile. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us we're all human beneath our titles, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Home with Dad. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Arlen Brooks had not taken a real holiday in 9 years. Not a long weekend, not a birthday off, not even a sick day where he truly rested. Since the day his wife died during a late-night commute, leaving him alone with a newborn son and a mortgage that felt like a lifetime sentence, Arlen's world had narrowed to 2 things: work and fatherhood. Every morning before sunrise, he packed lunches, tied shoes, checked homework, and kissed a still sleepy forehead. Every night, after overtime and exhaustion, he reheated leftovers, listened to stories about school, and fell asleep at the kitchen table with bills spread out like a losing hand of cards. Joy, for him, had become something small and quiet, like watching his son breathe or catching the smell of coffee before the day demanded him back. His job at Carson and Blythe Logistics paid just enough to keep them afloat, but it demanded everything in return. Arlen was known as reliable to the point of invisibility. He covered shifts without complaint, answered emails at midnight, and never used the vacation days that accumulated like dust in his employee file. Management loved him for it, but never enough to ask why he never took time off. When his son Micah turned 9, the same age Arlen had been when his own father walked out, something inside him tightened with fear. He promised himself that Micah would never grow up remembering only his father's absence. That promise was why he finally requested 3 days off. 3. Not a week in Europe, not a luxury resort. Just a short daytime trip to a nearby coastal town where the ocean was calm and the boardwalk still smelled like sugar and salt. Micah had never seen the sea before. Arlen planned every detail carefully, booking the cheapest motel, packing sandwiches, and choosing a weekday to avoid crowds. He submitted the request months in advance. It was approved automatically, no questions asked, because no one expected him to actually take it. The morning they left, sunlight spilled across the highway as if the day itself was cheering them on. Micah pressed his face to the window, marveling at everything, while Arlen felt a strange mix of joy and guilt, as though happiness were something he had stolen. They walked the boardwalk hand in hand, laughed over dripping ice cream, and sat at a small seaside cafe where the tables were chipped, but the view was endless. It was there, under a wide blue sky, that Arlen's phone buzzed with the email. The subject line was cold and efficient. Employment status update. The message informed him that his absence during a critical operational period demonstrated a lack of commitment, and that his role had been terminated effective immediately. No conversation. No warning. No acknowledgement of 9 years of loyalty. Just a polite dismissal, written by someone who likely went home to a quiet house and a full night's sleep. Arlen did not cry. He stared at the screen until the words blurred, then locked the phone and slipped it into his pocket. Across the table, Micah was grinning, lemonade on his chin, talking excitedly about seashells and waves. Arlen smiled back, because this moment mattered more than any job ever had. He chose, in that instant, not to let bitterness steal what little joy they had claimed. What Arlen did not know was that 2 tables away, seated beneath a striped umbrella, someone had been watching him with quiet attention. The woman was dressed simply, her hair pulled back, her posture relaxed in a way that came only from confidence earned, not borrowed. Her name was Rowena Carson, and she was the founder and majority owner of Carson and Blythe Logistics. She was also the silent partner few employees ever met, preferring to observe from the edges rather than command from the center. Rowena had taken that day off herself, something she rarely did, to meet an old friend who had helped her survive the early, brutal years of building her company. She noticed Arlen not because he was loud or impressive, but because of how present he was with his son. In a world where people were constantly distracted, Arlen's attention never wavered. He listened, laughed, wiped sticky hands, and leaned forward as if every word Micah spoke mattered deeply. Rowena saw something familiar in him, the exhaustion of someone who had given too much for too long without recognition. When her friend arrived late, Rowena found herself watching Arlen longer than she meant to. She noticed the moment his expression changed, the slight slump of his shoulders, the way he took a slow breath and then smiled again. She recognized that look. It was the look of someone absorbing bad news silently, so as not to burden someone else. That recognition stirred something uncomfortable inside her. Back at the office, far from the ocean and sunlight, the decision to fire Arlen had been made by Celeste Viral, a senior operations manager known for her rigid interpretation of rules and her belief that discipline kept a company strong. Celeste prided herself on efficiency and saw empathy as a weakness. She had noticed Arlen's absence during a week when shipments were behind schedule and decided to make an example of him. To her, employees were replaceable pieces, and loyalty was irrelevant if it interfered with productivity. Arlen returned home 2 days later with souvenirs and memories he would cling to in harder times. That night, after Micah fell asleep clutching a small stuffed dolphin, Arlen sat alone in the dim kitchen and allowed himself to feel the weight of what had happened. The fear came quietly but relentlessly. Rent, groceries, school supplies, all lined up like threats waiting for him to falter. Still, beneath the fear, there was a strange calm. For the first time in years, he had chosen his son over fear, and that choice felt right, even if it terrified him. He updated his resume, sent applications, and took temporary work wherever he could find it. Days turned into weeks. Some employers never replied. Others offered wages that barely covered childcare. Through it all, Arlen remained gentle, patient, and present because Micah deserved stability even when life felt unstable. Rowena, meanwhile, could not shake the image of that seaside cafe. When she returned to the city, she asked for a quiet review of recent terminations. She did not announce herself or demand explanations. She simply read. When she came to Arlen Brooks' file, she stopped. 9 years of flawless performance. No warnings. No complaints. And then termination for taking approved leave. Something tightened in her chest. She requested more information and learned that Arlen was a single father. That he had never taken a vacation before. That his leave had been approved automatically. Rowena felt a familiar anger rise, not the loud kind, but the cold, focused kind that came when she realized her company had failed someone who embodied the values she claimed to believe in. She arranged a meeting with Celeste, framing it as a routine review. Celeste arrived confident, certain that her decision would be praised. Instead, she was asked to explain, in detail, why she believed firing Arlen had been necessary. As Celeste spoke about discipline and commitment, Rowena listened carefully, noting what was missing. There was no mention of humanity, loyalty, or fairness. Only control. Rowena did not raise her voice. She did not accuse. She simply explained that leadership was not about punishing people for living their lives, but about building systems that allowed them to thrive. She pointed out that Arlen's absence had been approved, that his performance record was exceptional, and that firing him without review exposed the company to moral and legal failure. Celeste left that meeting shaken, realizing too late that she had mistaken authority for wisdom. Rowena personally reached out to Arlen, though she did not yet reveal who she was. She requested a meeting, framing it as a conversation about his experience with the company. Arlen nearly declined, worn down by rejection, but something urged him to go. They met in a bright cafe during the day, sunlight spilling across the table. Rowena listened as Arlen spoke honestly about his years at the company, his son, his wife's death, and the holiday that had cost him his job. He did not complain. He did not demand. He simply told the truth. Rowena felt tears sting her eyes, not from pity, but from respect. It was then she told him who she was. The revelation left Arlen stunned. He had spent years working for a name that now sat across from him, listening with genuine care. Rowena apologized, not with corporate language, but with sincerity. She told him his termination was wrong. She offered him his job back, with full back pay, benefits restored, and a flexible schedule that acknowledged his role as a father. She also offered something unexpected, a leadership role in a new department focused on employee well-being and retention, because she believed someone who understood sacrifice could help change the culture. Arlen did not answer immediately. He thought of Micah, of the ocean, of fear and hope tangled together. He accepted, not just for security, but because he believed he could help prevent others from being hurt the way he had been. The changes that followed were quiet but powerful. Policies shifted. Managers were trained to see people, not just productivity. Celeste was removed from her position and given the choice to learn or leave. Some resisted, but many felt relief, as though permission had finally been granted to be human. Months later, Arlen took Micah back to the same coastal town, this time without fear. They sat at the same cafe, sunlight warm on their faces, and Arlen watched his son laugh, knowing that choosing kindness had changed their lives. He understood now that sometimes, the moment that feels like the worst ending is actually the beginning of something better. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that compassion still matters in a world obsessed with speed, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement helps these stories reach others who might need hope today. And before the end, we invite you to comment with one word that describes how this story made you feel. Arlen never forgot the fear of that first holiday or the courage it took to choose his son over security. But he also never forgot that kindness, when it finally arrives, can change everything.